Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I rise today to discuss the tax bill. Mr. President, I'm disappointed. You see, I'm one of the many Americans who believes we need to reform our tax code to benefit middle-class families. I also believe we need to make those reforms in a common-sense, responsible way. That's sadly not the approach that was taken with this legislation. From the very beginning of this effort, I've been willing to partner with Republicans or Democrats, with President Trump and his team. In fact, when President Trump unveiled his tax priorities in my home state of Indiana, I traveled with him on Air Force One. I wanted him to know I was listening to his priorities and that I agreed with his stated goals of supporting the middle class and keeping jobs right here in America. I also wanted Hoosiers to know I was committed to working with the President to reform our tax code in a way that helped Hoosier families and businesses. After that trip with the President, and in every meeting with the administration, including 2 meetings at the White House, attending Vice President Pence's speech in Anderson, Indiana, and in multiple discussions with top administration officials, I left optimistic that we could work together to reform our tax code to achieve those goals we had agreed upon. I expected a proposal that was focused on cutting taxes for middle-class families. I expected a proposal that would help keep jobs in America and take away tax incentives from corporations that flagrantly outsource jobs to foreign competitors in foreign countries. Unfortunately, that is not the bill that the Majority Leader pushed through the Senate, nor is it the final bill that he and the Speaker of the House agreed upon. The reasons I oppose this bill are plain and simple, clear and common sense. Instead of providing a tax cut that overwhelmingly benefits the middle class, this bill cuts taxes for the wealthiest Americans while raising taxes on a majority of families making less than $75,000 in the coming years. Instead of closing tax loopholes like the shameful one that allows Wall Street hedge fund managers to pay a lower tax rate than a Hoosier firefighter, than a Hoosier teacher, than a Hoosier policeman, or a Hoosier steelworker. Imagine that. A hedge fund manager's tax rate is lower than that man and woman who were fighting a fire in Evansville this year. This bill preserves these giveaways. This is outrageous. Instead of protecting American jobs by adopting provisions from my End Outsourcing Act, an effort that President Trump has told me on numerous occasions that he is all in on and supports. Instead, this tax bill does zero to claw back tax breaks and incentives awarded to corporations that later decide to outsource American jobs. It also retains loopholes that allow corporations like Rexnord and Carrier to continue deducting the moving expenses when they ship those American jobs to other countries. Imagine that, a tax deduction for the moving expenses to ship American jobs to other countries. Left it alone. There perhaps is no better example of an issue on which the President and I agree on than preventing the outsourcing of American jobs. Right now, in my home state of Indiana, 9 companies have outsourced or will outsource the jobs of 2,200 Hoosiers. This is impacting moms and dads, sisters and brothers, wives and husbands, our neighbors, our friends. This is our opportunity to stand up for American workers and make it clear that if corporations want a lower tax rate or special tax deductions, if they want the American taxpayer to invest in them, then they must invest in American workers. That's the conversation I had with the President when we talked about our shared goals for tax reform. And these are the issues where I know there is common ground. And yet, as Gene Sperling, formerly the chief economic advisor to two different presidents, recently wrote, if there was one thing the Republican international tax bill was advertised to accomplish, it was that it would favor locating jobs and profits in the United States. It does the opposite, expanding the degree our tax system tilts the playing field against American taxpayers and American workers. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this column by Gene Sperling, recently published in The Atlantic, entitled, How the Tax Plan Will Send Jobs Overseas.
Without objection.
Thank you. The Majority Leader's bill before us today continues the same broken tax system that incentivizes companies to move jobs to foreign countries, hurting more American communities and undercutting thousands of working American families. In Indiana, we know there's no such thing as a free lunch. In the Hoosier State, we work hard and we expect everyone else to pay their fair share. The tax bill we're considering cuts taxes for corporations and the wealthy by asking some middle-class families to pay more and by making health care more expensive for millions and millions of Americans. According to the nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, if we account for budget gimmicks, the cost of this bill could reach $2.2 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars. Here's what that means. This means our kids and our grandkids, their paychecks, the hard-earned money they make in the years ahead, will be sent to China to pay for tax cuts that will be given today to the wealthiest people in America. Our kids and our grandkids will be paying the bill for this tax cut that puts money in the pockets of the very, very wealthiest. That is almost beyond belief. We need tax reform that actually benefits Hoosiers who go to work in the dark and come home in the dark. These are the folks that I run into at church or who stop by my office or I see at the gas station or at the diner. They look me in the eye and they tell me they're working hard to make a decent living, to pay the bills, to raise their families, to have a shot at retiring with dignity. They're not looking for any handout. They simply want a good-paying job and a fair shake. Unfortunately, this bill is a significant missed opportunity to provide relief to middle-class families and to protect American jobs. From the very, very beginning of this debate, I've engaged in a good faith effort to exchange ideas and priorities for what we'd like this tax bill to look like, and to work together in a bipartisan manner. And I've worked to improve the bill that my colleagues have rushed through, a largely closed and partisan process. That includes my support for Senator Rubio's effort to expand the child tax credit for hardworking families, to which I give him much credit. Our country is stronger when we work together and when we pass legislation that focuses on the middle class, on regular families, that leaves a better future for all our children. Sadly, that is not what this bill would do. This bill raises taxes on many middle-class families, makes health care more expensive, does not address outsourcing, and significantly increases our national debt. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.